Thank you. Today we're going to go ahead and continue this conversation about new imperialism and America expanding in our foreign policy. We talked about economic interest last time, and the two reasons why America wanted to expand based on economic interest were what? What's the first reason? Natural resources, and the second reason is markets. We want access to new markets. So we have economic interest based on natural resources and new markets. We talked about McDonald's and Coca-Cola dominating the world. Also, we talked about international Darwinism. And the basic reason why America is taking over the world or imperializing based on international Darwinism is this notion that America is superior, right? We just feel that we're better. Now, the other element that comes with that, though, is that, yes, we are superior, we're better than you, but the second element you have to remember is that with taking over other countries are the responsibilities. If I take over your country, what is now my responsibility? I need to civilize you. And so a lot of it comes down to, yes, we are superior. We're going to bring our culture, our language, our religions. But along with that, I have to bring civilization. And are you going to resist that civilization? Yeah, so this idea is that it's not going to be an easy conquering of other countries. Then we talked about white man's burden a little bit. The third element then is where we're going to begin today. Global competition. The other reason why America wants to begin forming an empire is because of global competition. Have the European countries been forming their empires for quite some time now? Yes. In fact, America is forced to play catch-up. And if we don't begin our empire now, what's going to happen in the future? Yeah, they're going to be crushed. All the land's going to be taken. They might be made part of someone else's empire like they were before. I mean, it really is a grab bag. All these European countries are taking parts of the world, and America wants in on it. Because look, by 1900, look at the world. A lot of the world was controlled by who? By Europe. You have England dominating Australia, India, large parts of Africa. And so what it came down to was America said, well, we only control us and Alaska. If we really want to start competing in this global market, we have to start taking over. And so today, folks, a little bit later, you see this other shift, and America decides to start expanding its own empire more and more in the future. So eventually we'll take over the Philippines in this unit. We'll talk about Cuba, Puerto Rico, those other territories. Another major area of conflict will be when we try to take over what territory? China, when all the major European powers are going to try to take over China, including Japan. So China becomes this battleground for control and influence. Like I said, China is one of the most populated countries in the world, and if we take over China, we have access to their markets. So everyone wants China. We'll talk more about that later. The fourth reason. Religious interest. I mean, folks, we're doing this so we could spread Christianity. And I mean, look at this cartoon, folks. I mean, what is it suggesting? Who's struggling here? America and England, right? We're the ones who are carrying these heathens on our back in hopes of bringing them to what? Civilization. So we're the ones struggling to civilize these people, to bring religion to those that just don't understand, and they probably won't even appreciate it. So again, this notion of us, taking charge, being responsible, promoting our religious interests, because are we allowed to just let like half the world die and not ever hear the word of God? No, we have to Christianize them. It's the right thing to do. One of the biggest arguments for this was in Hosea Strong's Its Possible Future and Present Crisis. In this book, Hosea Strong's Its Present Future and Its Possible Future and Present Crisis, it talked about the need to spread Christianity and to civilize the world. It talked about the need to spread Christianity and civilize the world. And if you look at the cartoon, what's happening?
spread Christianity and civilize the world?
Yeah, spread Christianity and civilize the world. In this cartoon, folks, what were these countries before? Look at them. Poor, slaves, downtrodden. But once we took them over, they became civil. Look at them. They're wearing top hats and monocles and scarves and ties. I mean, standing up straight without the yoke of slavery upon them. I mean, hey, look what we brought. Pretty good. And so, again, this notion of us bringing civilization was argued in Hosea Strong's Our Country, Its Possible Future and Present Crisis. Another element, then, that promoted creating an empire at this time was military interest. In Alfred T. Mahan's The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, this argued that we needed to create a global empire in order to spread out our what? I mean, military, yes, but specifically what element of our military? The Navy. This is pretty much saying the most powerful countries in the world have the most powerful navies. I mean, look at the U.S. You know, armies are great, but when you have an aircraft carrier sailing into your bay, that's terrifying. I mean, aircraft carrier is pretty much a floating city. Nuclear powered. It can shoot nuclear weapons. It can house planes, helicopters, an entire, regiment if it needs to. And so the argument of the influence of sea power upon history was that they wanted to begin expanding their military across the world, and specifically their navy. That navies were the most important. Because if you control different parts of the world, throughout the world, why is that good for your navy? They can land wherever they want. We can refuel there. We can restock there. We can, land and make repairs. But can we do that if we only control the United States? We have to sail all the way around the world before we can repair our ships? No. So we want to control parts of the world. I mean, look at America today. I mean, don't we have Navy bases all across the world? Yeah, all throughout the world we have Navy bases that we control. That's part of this. We want to make sure we have a strong influence on history with our sea power. One of the things we're going to invent at this time is the Great White Fleet. And the Great White Fleet is going to be fairly significant, folks, because the Great White Fleet will be the first all-steel navy. It'll be the first all-steel navy. It's pretty much a modern navy. And why is it important to have an all-steel navy? It's going to be more difficult to shoot down. What are most other ships made out of still? Wood. Some of them might have wood with steel clad, the ironclad ships from the Civil War. But here, they're not made out of wood and then have steel on them. These are steel ships. So are these going to be far more powerful? Yes, they are. They're going to be far more sturdy. So by 1900, America has the third largest navy, following behind only what two other countries? England and not Spain, not France, Germany. So England and Germany, and then you have America. So have we come up a long way in a very short amount of time? Before we were no one. By 1900, we have the third largest navy in the world. Pretty impressive. The last reason why we're expanding at this time is because of yellow journalism. The popular press demanded exotic stories and exotic locations. And so they wanted us to expand to the rest of the world so they would have stories to write about. They wanted exotic stories and exotic locations. So how can we write about a tropical paradise if we don't own it? And so the newspapers wanted these stories, and so they encouraged America to continue sailing out to take over the world. Popular press, led by, again, William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. Questions, comments there? None? Okay. Eventually, these two newspaper fellows will start a war, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. So, the question I have for you right now, you don't have to write down this question, but is which of the following was most important to promoting American imperialism and why? So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes or 1 minute to talk to your partner, and I want you to tell me, of these, which one do you think is the most important cause of promoting American imperialism and why? So I'll give you just a few minutes. Talk to your partner. Of these 6, which is the most important? Then one lead more to others? One of these the main reason you decide. All right, you guys seem to be done. I'm going to go ahead and choose one person. Let's go with someone. Catherine, which one do you think was most important in causing American imperialism? Why would you say international Darwinism was the most important in promoting American imperialism? So it's because of the sense of superiority, they took over the world because they just thought they were better. Okay. Does anyone disagree? Does anyone think that there is something else more important than international Darwinism? This entire class agrees that international Darwinism is the most important? Okay, Rudy.
Well, what competition? Because they had to be stronger than Britain or all them. They had to play catch up pretty much, so they had to strengthen everything.
Okay, so maybe it's not the international Darwinism, but this idea of global competition, that it's not about their superiority, but superior or more of survival of the fittest. If they don't do it, they're going to be taken over by England or Germany or France. So it's about global competition more than anything else. Does anyone disagree with that? Yeah, Gregory.
It could be military interest because they wanted to strengthen the Navy more. Like they're focusing on the Navy, aiming at the Navy, and I think that if we strengthen the Navy, then we'll have it'll be like imperialism in a way because we're like you said, we're like the third strongest country, but if we train them more, wouldn't the rankings go up and we'll be first? And that's kind of like imperialism because we can still we can take over some countries, really.
Yeah. So, your argument is that it's not necessarily global competition or international Darwinism. It's kind of that, but more the focus is on building a navy so that we can compete on a global market, so that we can show that we are superior. But none of that will matter unless we have a powerful navy first. Okay? Anyone else disagree with any of that? Anyone else think there's anything else besides? So everyone here agrees that it's either international Darwinism, global competition, or military interest? Yeah, Daisy.
I thought it could have been economic interest.
Why?
Well, they wanted to better themselves as economy, trying to get natural resources from other places because we don't have very many. So if you go to, you know how we bought Alaska?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know any of it, but sooner we had our own oil, and it's just trying to make their economy better and not caring about the other.
Okay, so it's not necessarily about taking over the world, but realizing that if we don't take over the world, we won't have all those necessary natural resources, and that's really what it's all about. The game is about the economy. If we have to take over the world, so be it. If we need a stronger military, so be it. But you're saying the root is the economy. Okay? Anyone else? All good reasons, I think. I think that, economic it could be the sense of superiority, the sense of, me versus them, global competition. It could be about the sense of military interests. It could also be about yellow journalism and religious interests. But good. At least you guys have an argument to support. Anyway, let's move on. Well, in 1896, as you guys already know, William McKinley became president. Again, placeholder. Just write 25th POTUS, William McKinley. You don't have to write down the years again, since this is like the 4th time you're doing it. Again, you're just placeholding here. And when William McKinley was president in 1896, he was responsible for the guy that said, hey, we're going to be a country of prosperity. And we're not just going to be prosperous at home, we're also going to be prosperous abroad. We're going to spread this civilization around the world. And so really, McKinley was the first imperial president. You have to make the argument that McKinley was the first imperial president. Because up until this point, you have other presidents talking about us expanding and making us, the most prosperous country, not just here, but everywhere. No. But now you have McKinley becoming the first imperial president, this idea of, prestige at home and abroad. And so one of the first things that he does is he annexes Hawaii. Does anyone know why? Hawaii was its own independent country at the time. It was controlled by its own king. But America began establishing sugar plantations in Hawaii. Sugar plantations. You can also talk about pineapples, bananas, whatever else, but mostly at this time was sugar plantations. By the way, I don't know if you guys know this. Do you know where pineapples come from? Well, I mean, literally, they're not trees. Pineapples are bushes. I know most people, it trips people out, but a pineapple is a bush. Yeah, that drives people crazy. Like what? Yeah, it's like the heart of a bush, and that's what a pineapple is. No, it's from the ground up. Yeah, go look it up later. It'll be like, well, I thought pineapples came from trees. No, it's a bush. I don't think the rest of this conversation matters, just that one thing that I said. Anyway, so, annexation of Hawaii. So here's the thing, folks. The part that you don't need to know is that we wanted control of Hawaii because do we want to keep having to trade with Hawaii? No, instead of trading with Hawaii, we can just what? Own Hawaii. We can just take Hawaii. So what happens is that the American sugar planters in Hawaii have a rebellion. They rebel against the Hawaiian king. You might know him as King Kamehameha. Not the Dragon Ball Kamehameha thing. But named after King Kamehameha, he was the king at the time. He was overthrown. And he was replaced by his sister, Queen Liliuokalani. Or just Queen Lil. Queen Liliuokalani, or just Queen Lil. Well, Queen Lil was in charge, and was she happy that the Americans rebelled? No. So she tried to push back against the Americans, and America said no. And so what ends up happening is McKinley decides to annex Hawaii in 1898. Can she really do anything about it? No. I mean, it's Hawaii versus the United States. Not she's just a woman. She's a country with no powerful navy. Anyway, so Queen Liliuokalani, they're taking over. Yeah, and she's taking over. Now, why might we want Hawaii then? Look, it's the middle of the Pacific Ocean, so why is Hawaii so critical to America forming an empire? It's yeah, so you can refuel your ships. It's a great staging ground. And having Hawaii, folks, gives us access to what? Guys, having Hawaii gives us access to what? It's a jumping off point to what? To Asia, to China. Because is it going to be difficult for America to sail all the way to Asia in one go? Think of all the supplies we're going to need, the fact that we might not make that journey in one go. But now that we control Hawaii, Hawaii becomes a refueling station, a restocking station, and all of a sudden, does America have a platform to begin conquering Asia? So Hawaii was so important in this conquering of all of Asia. Everyone good on Hawaii? Okay. Just so you know. Well, this brings us to the Spanish-American War. You see what I mean? McKinley being really involved here. He's already taken over a country. Now he's going to fight a war. Very involved, this guy. Well, the Spanish-American War. Up until this point, folks, what has been our foreign policy? Monroe Doctrine, isolationism of some degree or another. But have we been a very active country trying to take over the world? No, not at all. But now with the Spanish-American War, you're going to see this shift. So first, let's talk about the causes. And no, you don't have to write down causes of the Spanish-American War. Causes will suffice. Okay, here we go. First off, Jingoism. Jingoism, not Django. Jingo. What is Jingoism? Does anyone know or ever heard this word, Jingoism? Jingoism, folks, is extreme nationalism. It's extreme nationalism. It's extreme nationalism. The idea behind Jingoism is we should take over the world because we're awesome. Or let's say, I don't know, someone spits in the general direction of our president. Like, you can't spit in the general direction of our president to war with you because you cannot mess with our pride. You know, we're a proud country. So Jingoism was an intense form of nationalism. It was almost promoting an aggressive foreign policy. Like, America wants to prove itself to the world. Does America like being third? No. America wants to start becoming first. Okay? So again, Jingoism was this intense form of, or extreme sense of nationalism that tried to promote an aggressive foreign policy. Let's show the world what we're made of. You know, if England says they're number one, what if we're number one? What if England's number two? We have to prove that to them. So are we going to look for ways to get involved? And not just like, oh, we should feed the sick, like we should kill the sick. You know, and prove that we're better than the sick. Yeah, that kind of thing. 2, the yellow press. Yeah, folks, this is a really old newspaper. And yet, the yellow press, what were they fond of doing in the past?
Lying.
Just straight out lying. Or exaggerating. Or just lying. I mean, yes, there's exaggeration, and then they're just blatantly lying. And the newspapers back then just blatantly lied because what? Because they can. And why is that good to lie, though?
Because you sell more.
Because you sell lots more newspapers. Well, would a war sell a lot of newspapers?
No.
Yeah. A war would sell a lot. Because wouldn't you want to read about what's happening at the war? Well, here's the thing, folks. The yellow press, many argue, created this war. Here's why. There was a Cuban revolt in 1898. Kind of. There was a Cuban revolt in 1898, and were the newspapers excited about this?
Yep.
They're like, oh man, Cuban revolt. We can send our newspapers in. We can report about this. And by the way, the Cubans were rebelling against who? Who were they rebelling against? Spain, right? And they're saying, you know, Spain was, they sent over the butcher. The butcher was murdering all these Cubans. And America's like, oh, that's the story that we want. Well, here's the thing. We sent our newspapers over, and they sent back, there is no war here. Request to be recalled. And so the actual news reporters sent back to Pulitzer and her saying, there is no story here. There's kind of a revolt, but it's not even that bad. This is really nothing. There's really no story here. But is that what Pulitzer and Hearst want? Do they want a non-story? No, they want a story. So what Pulitzer and Hearst say, or rather what Joseph Pulitzer says is, please remain. You furnish the pictures. I'll furnish the war. So he says, just send some photos. I'll make the war. So he wants a war. In fact, he's willing to fabricate a war. He's willing to fabricate the atrocities. He's willing to lie to start a war. Does that make sense, folks? So there is no war. He says, take a picture of a sick kid and I'll use that. Instead of like, kid starving because his parents are bad, instead it's kid starving because the Spanish refused to feed him. Does that make sense? Like, that's what he's planning to do. So here's what Pulitzer does with the pictures that he finds. He writes newsletters like this. So I want you guys just to follow along as I read this, and let me know how you feel by the end of this. This was a journal article that he called How Long? And it's a story about what's happening in Cuba and America doing nothing. Here we go. How long are the Spaniards to drench Cuba with the blood and tears of her people? How long is the peasantry of Spain to be drafted away to Cuba to die miserably in a hopeless war? The Spanish nobles and Spanish officers may get medals and honors. How long shall old Cuban men and women and children be murdered by the score, the innocent victims of Spanish rage against the patriot armies they cannot conquer? How long shall the sound of rifles in Castle Moro at sunrise proclaim that bound and helpless prisoners of war have been murdered in cold blood? How long shall Cuban women be the victims of Spanish outrages and lie sobbing and bruised in loathsome prisons? How long shall women passengers on vessels flying the American flag be unlawfully seized, stripped, and searched by brutal, jeering Spanish officers in violation of laws of the nations and the honor of the U.S.? How long shall American citizens arbitrarily arrested while on peaceful and legitimate errands be immured in foul Spanish prisons without trial? How long shall the U.S. sit idle and indifferent within sound and hearing of raping and murder? How long? You'd be like, oh, damn. Wouldn't you feel like you had to do something? Guys, and a good amount of this is not even true. But are you angry? You're like, yeah, why are we doing nothing if all of this is happening? That's not okay. And does that sense of jingoism come back? Like, we can't let this happen. Not on our watch. We're America. And if Spain is going to go into our backyard and abuse our friends, that makes us look like punks, and we have to get involved. So do you see the role of yellow journalism here? It's not just reporting anymore. They're fabricating stories. They're trying to get the American people to go to war so they can report on it and sell the American people newspapers about the war that they started. That's what's happening here. Third, the Lome Letter. Well, the Lome Letter was a letter by the Spanish ambassador to the U.S. It was a letter written by the Spanish ambassador to the U.S. So Spain sent their ambassador to the U.S. And in the Lome Letter, the Spanish ambassador, Lome, criticized President McKinley's foreign policy. So again, this is the Spanish ambassador to the U.S., Lome, Depuis Lome. He wrote a letter criticizing President McKinley's foreign policy. And by the way, this letter was not supposed to go to President McKinley. This letter was a secret letter to Spain. But he wrote a secret letter, let's say, criticizing McKinley's foreign policy. Good so far. Well, secret letters are fine, but here's the thing. William Randolph Hearst found the letter. It was leaked to him, and he published it. The newspapers published the letter, And what was the American reaction to the Spaniard criticizing the American president? How dare you? I mean, folks, they said, you can't criticize my president. How dare you? That is my president. And so were the Americans insulted? It was like a slap to their face. Hey, that's my president. Don't you insult him. It's like being at the airport, folks, like international airport. There you are sitting down in the airport criticizing our president. Like, oh, George Bush or Barack Obama are like the worst presidents ever. They're so terrible. And some British guy's like, yeah, your president's terrible. You go, hey, no. You do not get to criticize my president. Okay? I get to criticize my president because I voted. And I am an American. Don't you talk about my president. You keep your mouth shut and your opinions to yourself. That is not your right to criticize my president. So we're all for criticizing our own president. But when someone else criticizes you, we're like, whoa, whoa, no, no, no. No. America is awesome. And so did America feel insulted by the Lome Letter? We did. It was like a slap to the face. And did that American Jingoism come back? Like, oh no, they can't insult America. It's time. We got to prove to them that we're better. But is any of this enough to push us towards war? Perhaps. That brings us to 4. The sinking of the USS Maine. Here's what happens. In February 1898, the USS Maine, an American battleship carrying life-sized male dolls. Just kidding. You can just imagine there's dolls blowing up. Those are men, unfortunately.
Wait, what was the date again?
In February 15th, 1898, coming up next month, February 15th, 1898, the U.S. battleship, the USS Maine, exploded in Havana Harbor, which is in Cuba. Now, the ship was there to prevent any more atrocities by the Spanish that may or may not have been happening. But the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, killing 260 Americans. Now, immediately before any investigation could take place, what did the newspapers report? The Spanish did it! They did it! They killed the Americans. They sent a torpedo or a mine to start this war, and they posted pictures like this in their newspapers. Are these pretty powerful images? I mean, folks, let's look at this real quick. What imagery do you notice about this? Okay, a giant bloodied knife. What else do you notice that kind of jumps out at you? He's stepping on the American flag. What else do you notice? The tombstone of Maine soldiers murdered by Spain. What else do you notice? Yeah, he's a savage, obviously. He's not like a normal-looking guy. You see dead bodies in the back. And really, I think the most dramatic effect is the bloodied hands. I mean, really, it's just these bloodied hands. Folks, there's no evidence. We've done no investigation yet. And yet, the newspaper is saying, destruction of warfare was the work of an enemy. We don't know which enemy, but I think you can read through the lines that someone in Cuba that doesn't like America, that people might be rebelling against, they might be the ones that did it. And are we just going to sit back and let our 260 men just die? Or are we going to be a country and do something about it? They accused Spain of destroying the USS Maine.
We don't know who really did it.
Well, we do actually. But there was no evidence at the time. And actually what did happen was that the USS Maine exploded, or really the cause of the USS Maine exploding was the USS Maine. The powder kegs where they stored all the gunpowder, there was a spark somehow, and then it exploded in an engine room, and the USS Maine blew itself up. But do we care about that? Does that matter to the yellow journalist press? Does that matter even to the Americans that are dying for war? Those that, demand to be number one, to prove themselves to the world? No. And so, because the American people have read the newspapers, does McKinley have any choice here? Even without any real evidence, do the American people want blood? Sure. So, the fifth cause is McKinley pressured by the American public, declares war, or urges Congress to declare war. Because, by the way, the president cannot declare war. That is not their power. Would it be terrible to have a guy have the power to declare war on people? Yeah, that's a Congress's power. That's not a president's power to declare war. President can't declare war. That's dangerous. That's a dictator. But he says we should declare war, and usually when a president says we should go to war, does Congress agree? Yeah, usually. And so he says that we should go to war. He urges war. And that brings us to the Spanish-American War. But which of the following causes was most important to the causing of the Spanish-American War? So I want you to talk to your partner for about 2 minutes, discuss, and we'll share again. Who or which of the following was most important in causing this war? Make sure you have some arguments to discuss. All right, you guys seem about done. So, which of the following causes was most important? Let's choose someone by random first. Why Cynthia? Oh, why was Cynthia Martinez here?
Why?
No, I don't know. Was she here? Maybe she was here one day.
No, you put her in the test, the last test you took.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I remember now. Melissa Lopez.
I think it was the yellow press because they were kind of the instigators about the whole situation. They just made it bigger than it was.
So they were instigators. The yellow press made it bigger than it was. They exaggerated. Yeah, definitely. I think yellow press is a really big factor here. Would anyone disagree and say it was not the yellow press? It was another factor that made this war more likely? Okay, Gregory?
You can say all of them because they all have played a
Nah, you can't do that. Nah, you can't do that. That's the obvious answer. But we're not going to say all of them. Omar?
I wanted to say Jingoism.
Why Jingoism?
Because without Jingoism, the yellow press would be without the Jingoism idea of everybody wanting to just prove to the rest of the world that America is number one, that they're the best. The yellow press would have nothing to write on because that's not how the people feel.
Sure. So you could argue that the yellow press needed that kind of audience in order to perpetuate this idea of we need to go out and prove ourselves to the world. Good. The Lome Letter, anyone think that the Lome Letter was the main cause? It's a cause, but it's not like the main cause, right? What about sinking of the USS Maine? Anyone think that's the main cause? That's like the ignition, that's that's the actual spark of it. That ignited it. But, would you say that Jingoism and yellow press are kind of hand in hand and creating the culture that would create a war? I would say so. Of these, though, I might want to say yellow press is probably by far the most important. But Jingoism is a very big second best, because I would argue Jingoism was created by the yellow press. You're like, hey, we're so good, remember America, we're awesome. Who's going to keep telling you that? The press. Anyway. There was opposition to the war, though. Opposition came from the Anti-Imperialist League. Opposition came from the Anti-Imperialist League that would argue, what should we not do? Go to war. Or we should also try not to what? Create an empire. We should not imperialize. So again, there was opposition from the Anti-Imperialist League, led by people like William Jennings Bryan. Remember that guy? No. In any case, folks, there is opposition. And in order to get a war declaration, we have to appease these people. Because people are saying, hey, we're only going to war with Spain in order to take over what? Cuba. There's a fear that the only reason they're accusing America of only going to war to take over Cuba, saying, I know what you're doing. You just want Cuba to control. So we're not going to be able to get their votes until we make them feel better. And so, in April 20th, when declaring war, we include the Teller Amendment in Congress's war declaration. We include the Teller Amendment in Congress's war declaration, which said that the United States promised not to annex Cuba. The U.S. promised not to annex Cuba, which means that we're not going to what? We're not going to take it over. So is that going to make the anti-imperialists happy? Like, all right, okay. So we're only going to war to free the Cubans, not to take over Cuba thereafter, right? Yes, we promise we're not going to take over Cuba. We're just going to go to war and rid them of Spain. Make sense to everyone? Okay. So this brings us to the Spanish-American War. You can just call this the war. The war. This is going to be very short, just like every other war we cover. This one especially. So, the Spanish-American War was fought in two fronts: the Philippine arena and the Cuban arena. Which means we were going to fight in the Philippines because who controlled the Philippines at the time? The Spanish. And we're also going to fight in Cuba and Puerto Rico because they controlled Puerto Rico. Spanish, exactly. So again, this was fought in the Philippine arena and the Cuban arena. And the nice, interesting part of the Philippine arena was the Americans in the Philippine arena were supported by Filipino rebels, yeah. Were the Filipinos excited? Like, yeah, we will fight with you, America, because America said, what? You fight with us? What's going to happen? We're going to give you independence. They promised the Philippines independence. Or at least they said they would give them independence. They said, if you fight with us, Filipino rebels, we're going to give you independence. And they're like, yes, let's do that. So the Filipinos rose up and joined the Americans. And in Cuba, the same thing. In the Cuban arena, the U.S. was supported by the Cuban rebels and the Puerto Rican rebels. Who, again, did they want to be Spanish colonies anymore? Absolutely not. So this idea of America, the country of democracy, they were freeing us. So, did the rebels join with them? Naturally.
Who were we supported by again?
The Filipino rebels and then the Cuban and Puerto Rican rebels.
All right.
So all the rebels. Just rebels. Rebels in general. Anyway. Again, here in the Philippine arena, we're supported by the Filipinos. Here in the Cuban arena, we're supported by the Cubans and the Puerto Ricans. That happened. By the way, this war is happening at the same time. We're fighting on two fronts. Is that a pretty big deal for a country like us to be able to fight a war in two different areas? Yeah. Before, would we be able to have the military to do that? But no, we have a massive navy that can fight on two fronts. We have a navy fighting in Asia and a navy fighting in America, in South America. Pretty big deal. Well, The group of people that fought in Puerto Rico was, remember Teddy Roosevelt? We talked about him before? Yeah. Teddy Roosevelt, his Rough Riders, they fought in Puerto Rico. So just know that Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders, they fought to liberate Puerto Rico. And his most famous battle is the charge on, what am I doing? On San Juan Hill. The most famous battle for Roosevelt's Rough Riders was the charge on San Juan Hill, where the story goes that Roosevelt and his men charged up San Juan Hill to take it over from the Spanish. They were like, we're taking over, and they bravely charged up that hill on their horses. The real story, though, is that they didn't do it on horseback because the hill was so steep and the horses couldn't make it, so they charged up on foot. And the only reason why they were able to do it is because of several black soldiers that supported them. Black American soldiers, yeah. But again, San Juan Hill is just the story you should know about Teddy Roosevelt charging in Puerto Rico. Here's Teddy Roosevelt, our future president. Look at that guy. Baller! He killed some Spanish. Anyway, the Spanish-American War ends in 1898 with the Treaty of Paris. Wait, what year did the Spanish-American War begin? 1898. When did it end? 1898. This war lasted only 3 months. So, the things that you should know more than anything. The Treaty of Paris resulted in Cuba's independence. Okay. And you should write the other two down. Better just write all of it down. It resulted in Cuba's independence. And, in addition, Spain sold the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico to the U.S. for $20 million. And these countries became protectorates. Not colonies! Protectorates.
Can I just say Spanish sales by America to the U.S.?
No, you need to know specific countries. Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico for $20 million. Because Philippines is not Latin America. Philippines is in Asia. But again, are we calling them colonies? No. America doesn't colonize. We're protecting them. We bought them to protect them. And who's not very happy about this deal at all? Spain, clearly, yeah, they're pretty upset. But who's also not very happy? The Anti-Imperialist League. Who's also not very happy about this? What about the Philippines, the Guamese, and the Puerto Ricans? Remember how when we came over, we were the voice of independence and freedom? We're like, we freed you! And then we bought you. But that's what happened. We freed them from the Spanish in hopes of giving them independence, but instead, what did we do? We bought them. And we said, yeah, I hope you enjoyed your one day of freedom. Because now you're ours. Now, we made ourselves feel better by saying, hey, look, we're not taking you over to colonize you. We're taking you over to what? To protect you. And what are we going to bring to your country? Civilization and education. Hey, we're doing it for you. This is not for our benefit. This is for your benefit. So we made ourselves feel better. Huh? Well, of these 3 territories, which of these gained independence? Just the Philippines in 1946. Guam and Puerto Rico, they are U.S. territories. Still today. Anyway, now, Cuba is a major issue. Because, are we allowed to take over Cuba? Why not? Who can tell me why we're not allowed to take over Cuba?
The Teller Amendment.
The Teller Amendment. So we promised not to be able to do so in the Teller Amendment. So we're not allowed to take it over. So we're like, we can't have it. So instead, we force Cuba to include the Platt Amendment in their constitution. So we can't own Cuba. We're not allowed to. We said that in our constitution. But we force Cuba to include the Platt Amendment in their constitution. So they're forming a new government, and we say, hey, Cuba, do you want the U.S. military to leave now? Like, yeah, that'd be great. Okay, we're not going to leave, though, until you agree to the Platt Amendment. So again, they force Cuba to include the Platt Amendment in their constitution. And here's what the Platt Amendment said. The Platt Amendment said that Cuba could never sign a treaty without America's permission. Cuba could never sign a treaty without America's permission. Because, they're young and they don't know what they're doing. So we're here to guide them. So again, Cuba could never sign a treaty without America's permission. 2, the U.S. military could intervene in Cuban affairs when necessary. The U.S. military could intervene in Cuban affairs when necessary. So, if there's a riot, we have to send the U.S. military to protect you. No, we're here for you. You're a young country and you know how to protect yourself. So the U.S. military can intervene in Cuban affairs when necessary. And that's not for us. That's for you. And thirdly, the U.S. would control a Navy base or a naval base. Where? Where is it today still? Guantanamo Bay. The U.S. would control a Cuban Navy base or naval base at Guantanamo Bay, where up to recently still housed our terrorist prisoners. No, we didn't. No, we don't own Cuba. Teller Amendment. But let's be honest. Could we legally own Cuba? No. Could we still control Cuba? Yes.
So dictatorship?
It's not a dictatorship, but we're still treating it like a protectorate. Even though we can't own it, can we control it? So let's say we don't like what Cuba's doing. Oh, we're going to have to send in the military and depose your government because your decisions are not good for the people. Does that make sense, folks? So we can control Cuba without owning them, and that's the Platt Amendment. So are they a colony? No. But are they pretty much a colony? Yes. Make sense to everyone? Make sure you guys understand the Teller Amendment and the Platt Amendment. They are common questions. Huh? Because we couldn't take out Castro in the future because the Soviet Union said if we killed Castro, they would nuke us. It became very complicated. Before the Soviet Union had nuclear weapons, it was easy. And then when they got nuclear weapons, it became complicated. And nowadays, does America want to look like the aggressor today? Back then, we didn't care about our republic image. Today, we do. We're like the savior of the world. We don't want to look like a bully. Back then, everyone was a bully. We were just one of them. Today, we're like the world savior. We're the world police. Huh? Germany, England, America, Japan. There's a lot of bullies. Anyway, the nickname of this war, folks, was known as the latest, greatest, shortest war. It was also known as America's splendid little war. So the two nicknames that you might come up when they're talking about Spanish-American War is the latest, greatest, shortest war and the splendid little war. Because, when you're older, you'll be like, hey, remember that war that we fought in 1898? There was in 3 months. Oh, yeah, I remember that. I almost forgot about that because it was only 3 months. So, the latest, greatest, shortest war or the splendid little war. It was fun. It was enjoyable. Remember that war? Oh, yeah, it was so fun. It was good times. By the way, in this war, a lot of people died from food poisoning because of the meatpacking industry. So, just so you know, that's when things became kind of serious. And they're dying. We thought it was just the flu or maybe mosquitoes. It was food poisoning because of the crap that we were feeding them. Anywho, here's a really quick story. You don't have to write this down at all. Newton Harrison's plan for defeating the Spanish during the Spanish-American War. It was a crazy plan. He said, the way to defeat the Spanish is to tilt the world on its axis and freeze them to death. And his plan was to build a 25,000-mile cable to wrap around the world at the equator, and then build a $65 billion power plant at Niagara Falls to power and send an electric charge through this 25,000-mile cable to reorient the planet to make the East and West the new poles that America would control. So that way, if there was a country that we didn't like, we would literally turn the axis of the planet and turn them away from the sun or towards the sun to either turn them into a desert or turn them into an ice block. That was our plan. Or that was a plan proposed. That wasn't the plan. That was a plan proposed by Newton Harrison. This plan back then would have cost us $1.65 trillion back then. It would have cost $1.65 trillion in 1898 money. But that was our plan. Let's become like a supervillain and control the axis of the planet so that when we have enemies, we'll just tilt them away from the sun to freeze them to death or focus them on the sun so they'll become a desert. That was the plan back then. That's how we become a global power. With Newton Harrison's plan to reorient the poles of the earth.
10 years to build a plan.
It would have taken 10 years to do it. But isn't that great? And here's a diagram for that plan. Like, it's simple. Just lay the 20,000-mile cable. Anyway, that's the idea. So yeah, history is interesting. I didn't even know about this till last week. Yes. Would it have worked? It wouldn't, because the theory of why it would have worked, because the sun's core was made of iron. It was an iron sun, which is not necessarily true. It's like helium. So there's not enough of a magnetic force to draw it. The Earth's core is iron, but not the sun, so it just wouldn't have worked. Could have tried it. Now, the next war that we're going to fight soon after is the Philippine-American War. Because who's not happy? The Filipinos are like, whoa, no, not okay. Okay? You never said that you promised independence. And so the Filipinos are going to fight back. What does this picture suggest? McKinley owned the Philippines, but what do the shadows suggest?
Napoleon.
He wants to be like Napoleon and Caesar. That McKinley wants to become what? A dictator, an emperor. He wants to take over, create his own empire. So you have the Philippine-American War. And just so you know, the rebels who fought with us are now the ones fighting against us. And the rebel leader was a guy named Emilio Aguinaldo, which is right there. He was a rebel leader who fought against the Americans and with the Americans during both wars. Yes, ma'am.
Who are those little people?
This is Mark Hanna. Remember his campaign advisor, Mark Hanna? And then I think he's Secretary of State, Hayes. So you get to be like, yeah, do it, Uncle Sam. And so the idea is that America is just throwing soldiers at this war, and people are for or against it. It kind of just depends. So we're going to read some documents in a second. But again, it's a war that the Filipinos are not very happy with. And who's going to oppose this war? In America, who's going to oppose this war? The Anti-Imperialist League. Again, opposed by the Anti-Imperialist League. Again, I am against American imperialism. William Jennings Bryan saying we don't like this. The Filipinos aren't happy with it. The Chinese, who we'll talk about in a second, are very unhappy with it. Yeah. The Anti-Imperialist League opposes this war because, again, do we like the idea of taking over other countries? And part of it is we feel like we're just murdering these people. That's one of the major reasons why we oppose it. The other reason is because should we be spending our money on wars? No, we should be spending our money on social services. Same argument today. Well, pretty much they're saying this war is causing what, according to this image?
Death.
Just deaths. Again, the title of this is the harvest in the Philippines? Instead of growing food, what are we growing? Dead bodies. No, we're not growing the dead. Like dead bodies, though, are what the harvest is. And again, what is being suggested here? It's called Civilization Begins at Home. Here we are. McKinley's focusing at the Philippines, trying to bring civilization to them. But what is Lady Liberty saying? Where? In the South. You're saying you want to bring civilization. What about civilization here in America? What's still an ongoing problem in America? Lynching, Jim Crow, not slavery anymore, but again, just the conditions of blacks in America. So you're saying, oh, you want to talk about civilization? Talk about bringing civilization to your own country. You know, where's your mirror? So, I want you to read this document to yourself quickly, and then I want you to tell me what is the opinion of Corporal Richard Bryan about the war in the Philippines. So, take about a minute and a half to read this. Sorry. Feel free to talk to your partner when you're ready about kind of what happened here, and we'll talk about it again. Okay. Let me call on someone to kind of share with me what happened here. So, Melissa Nava, what happened?
Basically, like the Americans came in and just started killing everybody. And they were the Filipinos were basically not doing anything at all to like fight against it. They were just being shot at or killed.
Sure. So, I mean, what's one word to describe what happened here? That's two words. Crime. It's a massacre, right? It is a massacre. I mean, the Filipinos waved a white flag, which usually means what? Surrender. They killed them. Women running away, what did they do? They killed them. Babies, they killed them. And so, based on this testimony by Corporal O'Brien, would you say that this person is for or against what happened in the Philippines? Against. Okay, let's read another statement. Go ahead and read this to yourself, and then we'll do it again. Okay, let's call on a few people here. Let's go with Nancy. What happened? Oh, what's this guy saying?
Is that they were like for war, like they wanted war to happen.
They do want the war to happen, and what is he saying about the Filipinos? That they're what? Does he have a high opinion, low opinion of the Filipinos?
That they're educated.
That they are educated?
That they aren't.
They aren't educated. They're educated the way a parrot is. They just say democracy, but they don't know what it means. And that, we're trying to help them, and they just don't support it at all. So, was this person in support of or against the war? In support of the war. They're saying the war is good. You don't understand that guy, Corporal Richard O'Brien. He might be saying some stuff, but the reality is this is a war that needs to be fought. Okay. Last one. I'm going to read this one quietly to yourselves. This is from an article from The Conservative. Just tell me what it says. Talk to your partner. There's 40 seconds left to talk to your partner. So make sure you talk to your partner. Okay, let's go with Vanessa Luna. What? America doesn't want to become imperialistic anymore. Did they want to be before? Yeah. There was Jingoism, it's that yellow press, but not so much anymore. This is kind of a good thing. This is a good thing, obviously, but they're also kind of racist. Why? It's still a very racist statement to make because what did they say? Yeah, imperialism is bad. Not because it's terrible and murdering those people, which is part of it, but I don't want to deal with those savages. Semi-savages. So it's kind of a good thing. It's like a backhanded compliment, like, hey, great job, and he slapped him in the face. Anyway, there's that. But again, if you look at this cartoon, what's happening?
They're selling the Philippines.
They're selling the Philippines, like the Philippines is a what? Really? You're selling the Philippines as if the Philippines was a slave. Look at the chain. So Uncle Sam is buying it, and who's not very happy about it? Anti-imperialist, the spirit of America, freedom, Colombia, all that stuff. Anyway, we did pass a few acts following the conquering of these countries. A few of the acts that we passed included, but are not limited to, the Foraker Act, with Puerto Rico, and what the Foraker Act did was that it denied Puerto Ricans U.S. citizenship. So we can own you, but you're not allowed to be Americans. So it denied Puerto Ricans U.S. citizenship. Which is kind of messed up when you think about it, because they're allowed self-government, but not U.S. citizenship. So we're going to own you, but you don't really control your own country, but you can't vote in our elections. So, just so you know. Foraker Act. The other things passed were something known as the insular cases. The insular cases. And pretty much the insular cases were Supreme Court cases, and insular, by the way, is Latin for island, just so you know. The insular cases asked one very important question. Does the Constitution follow the flag? And that's the most important question in this case. Does the Constitution follow the flag? Again, does the Constitution follow the flag? What that meant was, if I take my flag and I plant it over here, what does that mean about this new island? Does that mean that those people now have what? Rights. Do they have constitutional rights? So the Supreme Court and these islands asked, does the Constitution follow the flag? The Supreme Court ruled, no. Supreme Court ruled that no, it does not. That just because we're flying the American flag over your country, that does not mean you get everything that that flag represents. So, does the Constitution follow the flag? Supreme Court ruled no. You were not automatically given U.S. rights. Territories were not automatically given rights. Now, can we give you rights? Sure, but it doesn't mean you automatically get them. Which, again, is really messed up. So, again, does the Constitution follow the flag? No, it does not. So, the significance of the Spanish-American War, folks. Number one, America became a world power. Why? Well, for two reasons. One, we have an empire. Two, what did we do to make that? How did we make that empire? What did we have to do to make it? We defeated the Spanish. So we beat a world power. So again, we became a world power because we now had an empire and we defeated Spain. And two, America stops being isolationist and starts becoming an imperial power. America stops being isolationist and becomes an imperial power. Pretty much the Spanish-American War was a turning point for American foreign policy. It was a turning point for American foreign policy. Again, we stopped being isolationist and we became an imperial power, which means that the Spanish-American War was a turning point for American foreign policy. Questions, comments? Okay. the last thing that McKinley did as president, and he's already done quite a bit. Again, he got reelected. Here's him getting reelected. He lost. Bryant lost again. He opens up China in 1898. President McKinley opens up China. Yep. America opens up China. Okay, here's what's going on. America, or rather China at this time, was divided up into what were known as spheres of influence. What's a sphere of influence? An area of influence, definitely. And let's say this classroom is my sphere of influence. Could Mr. Ronquillo come into this classroom and just start teaching my class? No. This is my classroom. Can other teachers just walk in and start drinking my tea or coffee? No, this is my sphere of influence. The idea behind a sphere of influence in China was that competing countries would dominate a region and shut out competitors. So again, competing countries would dominate a region and shut out competitors. So again, competing countries would dominate a region and shut out competitors. Well, here's China so far. So name just two countries that are controlling China already. Russia and Japan. So let's say Russia controls this region. Can Japan trade in that region?
No.
Can France trade in that region? No. So let's say the Xinjiang region is growing, let's say, opium. If Japan wants opium, are they going to get any?
No.
Absolutely not. If they want opium, they're going to have to get it from Russia, who's going to charge a higher price. Let's say the Manchuria region, controlled, let's say, by Russia and, what is that? Russia and Japan. Let's say they control, silk. If Germany wants silk, are they going to be able to get it from Russia and Japan? Or are they going to get it from this region? No, they have to buy it at a much higher price from Russia and Japan. Is this an equal access to trade? No, and is most of China already taken over? So this is a problem for who?
US.
America. America looks at China and says, oh man, they've already taken almost all of it. How are we going to gain access if all these European and Japanese countries have already established spheres of influence? Is America going to be able to get a foothold in China now? Not with the spheres of influence system. So America has a plan. They say, I know what we're going to do. I know what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and redivide up China. Because right now, all these other countries, England, Germany, France, Russia, Japan, they're dividing up China, and China's definitely not happy about it, but who's also not at the table right now? America's not at the table. US is not at the table. We want to be at the table. And so, what we have introduced is the open door policy suggested by Secretary of State John Hay. And what the open door policy said was that America wanted them to open China, or they wanted equal access to all Chinese trade. They wanted equal access to all Chinese trade for all countries. Equal access to all Chinese trade for all countries. Equal access to all Chinese trade for all countries. Because here they are cutting up China for themselves, and America says, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not very economic. That's a very bad economic plan. What if we just share China together? You get a piece and we get a piece, and I can trade in your region, you can trade in my region, and that way China is an open door. Everyone can trade in China. Now, do the Europeans like this idea? Not really, because they liked having this sphere of influence, and this only benefited who? America, because America had nothing before. But America was slick about it, and they presented the idea, and all the countries said, no, we don't want that. That's a stupid idea. All the countries refused. But America went ahead anyway and announced that all the countries agreed, even though they said no. They said, hey, great news, all these countries agreed to the open door policy, even though they didn't. Well, he did. But now, it's up to the countries to say, hey, we didn't agree to that. That's like saying, hey, great news. Miss Molly just agreed to donate $1 million to cancer treatment and charity. Now, it's up to Miss Molly to say, no, I didn't, at which point everyone's going to ask what? Why don't you want to give money to charity? And all of a sudden, if she says, no, we didn't do it, she looks like the bad guy. So here, America says, hey, everyone is great, we have peace, everyone's willing to agree. And if the countries are willing to pull out, well, they look like bad guys. Like, oh, I'm sorry, do you not want to be a fair and equal country, Germany or Russia? Are you not wanting to share? So we kind of stabbed them in the back by publicly saying that they agreed when they really didn't. And here's Spain trying to catch up, but they're never going to catch up. Anyway, so open door policy opened up China to equal access to trade. Everyone clear on that? It eliminated the spheres of influence system. It eliminated the spheres of influence system. Well, are the Chinese happy about that? To be honest, they're not happy about any of this because they don't like foreigners controlling their country. So, here's the open door policy again. Pretty much, America saying, hey, anyone can come in. Everyone should have access to it. Basic idea behind open door policy. But the Chinese are not very happy with it, and in 1900, they rebel. Not just against America, but the Chinese rebel against all foreign control. And this rebellion is led by the Peaceful Harmonious Fists, which is a society of martial artists. And the story behind the Boxer Rebellion, folks, is that the Dowager at the time, the Empress, she wanted the foreigners removed from China. So this guy kind of appeared out of out of the dark. He says, you want to get rid of America? I have a plan. She's like, oh, tell us your plan, mysterious one. And so he says, you give me an army of martial artists, and I will use the mystical arts to grant and cast a spell on them so that they will not be harmed by any bullets. And the Empress is like, you can do that? He's like, oh yeah. I have trained in the mystical arts for several hundred years. Like, okay, let's do it. And so they got this army, the Boxer Rebellion. He cast a spell on them like, ah! Now no bullets. People are like, oh my God, I feel good. Let's go do it. So the Boxer Rebellion began, and all these martial artists are, charging towards the Americans and Russians and Japanese to drive them out of the country. And, they start fighting, and they start running towards them. And the Americans and the Europeans lay out their guns and ready to fire. And the Chinese are like, ha ha ha! Don't you know that there's a magical spell that'll deflect all bullets? And so the Americans fired their bullets. The Chinese laughed, and then many of them started dying. And they're like, oh no! The spell didn't work. And then many of the Chinese died.
What happened to the man who planned it all?
He disappeared and vanished back into the shadows. In any case, folks, the Boxer Rebellion unfortunately failed. It failed. And the lesson here is that magic's not real.
Never trust anything.
But in any case, the Boxer Rebellion unfortunately does fail, and they fail to drive out foreign influence, which is really bad for China. Why do you think there's so much distrust between China and America today still? That's still a big part of it. Well, that's the Boxer Rebellion. This is pretty much kind of what it appeared. But what does this cartoon suggest? Is this pro-American or anti-American?
Because China
China killed a man.
Because China killed that woman, and they killed this flag that's wrapped around a baby. And who's going to come and defend that flag and that dead people? Uncle Sam and McKinley are going to go off and defend and fight. And again, where are the Chinese carrying on their guns? Heads. That's usually pretty... The guy that carries heads on a pitchfork is usually the bad guy. Just so you know. If, like, you're in a battle one day and you don't know who's the bad guy, it's the one who cut off the enemy's head and put it on a pitchfork. That's usually a pretty clear sign. Good guys don't usually do that. They don't cut off their enemy's head and put it on pitchforks. Just FYI. Anyway, folks, by the end of 1900, what had America created? An empire. They created a transoceanic empire because, look, now we have a foothold in Asia, Guam, the Wake Islands, Midway, Hawaii, the atolls. We have Puerto Rico. And do we also pretty much control Cuba? Yes. We also control Alaska and the continental U.S. Does America have an empire by the end of the 1900s? Yes, we do. Everyone good there? Excellent. Eventually, William McKinley is assassinated. You don't have to write this part down. As you guys know, he's assassinated. And this is what we will talk about when we come back on Thursday.